Okay, hello everyone. This is the research method under the AS chapter. Okay, however, the research method also extends to the A level. So it is very important and essential for both AS student and A level student. Okay, so it's psychological research method. Now let's dive into it so I don't make this video very long. Okay, we have about 6 different types of research method, including experiment, number one, case study, correlation, observation, self-report, and longitudinal study. All right, so starting with the experiment. Experiments examine cause and effect relationships where independent variable is expected to have an effect on the dependent variable, right? Okay, something is expected to cause an effect on another thing. All right. So now, what is the first thing causing effect? That is the independent variable. So the factor that researchers manipulate or control in the experiment. Okay, e.g., study method. All right. You want to see if a study method would lead to high test score or low test score. So you use maybe group studying or individual studying. So you are controlling the study method, right? So that is what you hope that we have an effect on another thing, right? So that is your IV. Now, the other thing that will be affected by the IV now, that the IV will have impact upon, that is the DV. So the measured outcome that shows the effect of the IV, right? That is the test score in this situation. Okay, so that is IV and DV. Moving forward, what is a laboratory experiment? Laboratory experiment is an experiment. Two things that you should keep in mind there is that it is done in an artificial environment. Artificial environment can also be used in place of control environment, that is an environment that is not natural, not where the people normally go to. So laboratory environment in this sense is not just to talk about maybe your school laboratory. No, it just means any artificial place. Okay, so which means it's not where you live, where you go to normally. Your classroom where you have class is not a laboratory, it's actually a natural environment. But if you use a different room to have a class now, that is an artificial environment. I hope you get that. So the second thing to take note here is um, manipulated IV. So you manipulate the IV yourself. All right, it's done in an artificial environment and you manipulate the IV. So that is, for example, testing sleep effect on memory. Okay, effect of sleep on memory. So you bring them into a different room, which is different from their normal room where they sleep, their bed. Okay, to sleep, and then you want to see the effect of that on memory, and then you're able to manipulate who goes through the sleeping pattern and then who goes through the sleeping pattern. That means you are influencing the IV, right? Okay, for field experiment, it is in a natural environment. However, you're still able to manipulate the high V. Okay, classroom, for example, is a natural environment, but if you tell the teacher that this is how I want you to teach, so the teacher is not teaching in a natural way now. So you have influenced the IV in one way or the other. So that is a field experiment. So those are two things to look out when you're identifying field experiment. Natural experiment, on the other hand, all right, this is done in a natural environment. However, the IV is naturally occurring. Okay, so for example, you want to see the effect of a mathematics class on stress level. So you are not just bringing a teacher to come and teach mathematics. If you do that, that means you are influencing the IV. But assuming you wait until the students actually have mathematics class before you carry out your study, so that means you are doing it in their natural classroom and you are waiting until the IV occurs naturally. All right, so that is natural experiment. Quasi experiment, on the other hand, the IV is naturally occurring in the participant. So the IV in this situation is not external, it's something within the participant behavior, character, or traits. Let's say, for example, a pregnant woman, okay, versus non-pregnant woman. You want to see who will be more active, for example. So the pregnant woman and the non-pregnant woman. The pregnant woman naturally becomes someone that will go to the pregnant condition, and then the non-pregnant woman will be someone that will go to the non-pregnant condition. So it is a natural behavior or trait or characteristics of the participant. So gender can also be in this situation. So a boy will always be a boy and will go to boy condition. A girl will always be a girl and will go to girl condition. All right, all things being equal. Okay. Um, yeah. Moving forward now, we have the evaluation. Yeah, what are the strengths and the weakness, right? Yeah, I control over variables because you're able to control every other thing you do not want. You're able to take them away, so there is high control over variables, right? Now, clear measurement of specific variable show cause effect. When you're able to control other variables, then you have your IV alone as the only thing affecting the DV, right? So that shows that you have clear measurement. Okay, easy to repeat and verify findings because you did this in a particular environment, you used a particular measurement, everything is controlled. So the the data can easily be collected and another person can replicate what you have done. It's quite difficult to say, okay, someone that slept in his room and then you want to see effect of that on the person's behavior the next day. If another person wants to test another participant, the room the other participant might sleep in might be different. You understand? If it is in a natural environment, our rooms are not the same. But if it is in a laboratory experiment now, for example, you can ensure that okay, everybody have the same kind of room where they will sleep. So which means what's affecting the results will be the IV alone, and also it can be easily repeated. Weaknesses, artificial settings, which does not reflect real world behavior, right? If you bring people to an artificial environment, they may behave differently. Okay, so they might not reflect how they will behave in a real world situation. Let me give you an example. If you sleep in your house, you know how easy it might be for you to sleep. All right, but then if you're taken to a different environment to sleep because of a test, you might find it hard to sleep. So your behavior might be different, either consciously or unconsciously. Okay, participants may try to guess. So this rather lowers the ecological validity. All right, participants may try to guess and please researcher. This is another issue because they have been brought into a different room. So they try to guess what the researcher is trying to do, and you try to please the researcher. You know, try to please the researcher. Whereas in a natural situation, you might not you might just behave the normal way you'll be behaving, all right? But because it is an experiment, your behavior might be biased. Excuse me. Okay, moving forward. People may act differently when being observed. Just let me take water a little. Okay, moving forward. People may act differently when being observed, right? Okay, when you observe people, have you noticed that? Do you notice that people act differently when people are looking at them? All right, compared to when they are by themselves. So results may not apply to a broader population as well because you're bringing them to an artificial environment. Okay, so moving forward, field experiments now, evaluation. There's high ecological validity. Why? Because it is in a natural environment, so the ecological validity is high. Okay, so less participant bias due to natural behavior because the participants are in their natural environment, so there is low demand characteristics. Okay, they do not behave in a different way. What about the weakness now? There's poor control of extraneous variables because participants are in their natural environment. Imagine you're having class in your house. There could be a lot of distractions that the teacher might not be able to control, right? So it's similar. Now, difficult to prove causation because there are other variables affecting the study. So privacy and consent challenge is another thing. Okay. Uh, you might be actually intruding the privacy of the participants in one way or the other because it is in their natural environment. So this kind of a thing can be a little challenging depending on the study anyway. Okay, moving forward now we have the natural experiment. Okay, it is done in a natural environment and the IV is naturally occurring. So studies real world phenomena in authentic setting, so which shows high ecological validity, right? Okay, minimal demand characteristics because participants are mostly unaware because it is in their natural environment. okay, most of the time, but also they can be aware in some situations, right? Okay, so it reduces demand characteristics because they are in their natural environment, so they don't really need to guess around maybe trying to change their behavior in one way or the other. So they should feel relaxed and behave naturally. Okay, so enable studies of variables that can be ethically manipulated. So there are some variables that might be difficult to manipulate. So you just have to go straight to the real environment to study them. So what about the weaknesses? Limited to naturally occurring challenges. So sometimes the researcher might have to wait until the IV happens itself. So what if the IV does not happen itself? So that means it will be difficult to carry that out as a natural experiment, right? So for example, waiting for the math teacher until it teaches before you are able to carry out your research. So another one is poor control over extraneous variables, which shows that other factors can affect the study. So which means that it could be difficult to establish a clear causal relationship because there could be other factors. There is also low reliability due to challenges of replication. So replicating the natural environment of each individual can be difficult. Okay, so experimental design, what is experimental design? Number one, this basically talks about how you allocate participants to different experimental conditions. So in experiment, we often have what we know as the experimental condition and the control group. So the experimental condition is the condition which you're going to influence the IV. You're going to affect that condition, and the control group, you will just let it be without adding IV. So when they ask you to define control group is a condition where the IV is absent. So experimental group is the um, condition where the IV is present. Okay. So if, for example, you are looking at the effect of study pattern on, okay, no, let me not use that. Let me say, for example, you are looking at the effect of, like we did on the doodling condition, or maybe let me use a familiar term to some people. Let's say, for example, you want to look at the effect of a particular drink on behavior. You want to look at the effect of coffee on students' behavior. So the experimental group will be the group that you're going to give coffee, and then the control group will be the group where you will not give them coffee at all. So there will be absence of coffee. All right. So it's also important that you can have different levels of the IV. This is another thing that is very important to take note. All right. Now, different levels of the IV in this situation might be that, okay, a particular group might have, it is still the IV, but just different level. A particular group might have, for example, 1 liter of coffee. Another group might have maybe half a liter of coffee. And then another group might have 1/4 of coffee. And then the control group now will be no coffee at all. I hope you get the difference. So the levels of IV is, I mean, experimental condition is just having different levels. So it can be positive in some situation, it can be negative. All right. So, but the control group will be the absence entirely. Okay. So now talking about the experimental design, how do we allocate participants to the levels of the IV? All right, or maybe the experimental group and control group. So we have number one to be independent measures design. All right, so this talks about a set of group go to one level and then another different set entirely go to another level. For example, testing a new drug. Group A receive the drug, group B receive placebo, just like, for example, salt and water alone. That is not having any effect on them. All right. So group A now, these are the people that go there. A particular group people go there, and a different people, a particular group that is different entirely go to group B. All right. So that is independent measure. Okay. Different people go to different condition. What about repeated measure? You're using the same group of people to go into group A. Now, when those people are done, they also go to group B. All right. I hope you get that. So the same set of people that now they experience both condition, that is repeated measures design. Now, what about match pair design? This is simple. It's just having like a group of 10 people. Now you try to match them together based on a particular trait that is important to you. Maybe it could be age, all right? Who is 10 years old here? Who is 10 years old here? You bring two people that are 10 years old out. You also look at maybe 11. Who is 11? You look at two people with 11 years. You bring them out. Two people with 12, two people with 13, two people with 14. So now when you've identified them, you've tried to match them together based on their similarity. Now you separate them. So which means one of the 10 year, one of the 11, one of the 12, one of the 13, one of the 14 will now go to one condition. Then the other 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 will now go to the second condition. So which means there is still an independent measure design in match pair, only that before you go for the independence there, you match the participants. Okay. So for example, studying identical twins, they are already matched together. So one of the twin goes to a condition, the other goes to another condition. Right? It's as simple as that. Now, reducing participant variable. Okay, how can we reduce participant variable, for example, in a repeated measure design? Because no, in independent measure design, we said a group of people will go to one condition, another group will go to another condition. So there could be participant variables, that is individual difference. It could be that those that we ask to go to one condition are different. Obviously, they're going to be different from the people we ask to go to another condition. Okay, so one way to reduce participant variable is not to use independent measure design, is to actually use repeated measures design, where the same group of people go to both conditions, right? So another way to reduce participant variable is to engage in random allocation. Although you might still debate that even if you do random allocation, that is, everybody just pick maybe the group they will go to randomly. Okay, they're not following a particular order. At least that is fair, right? It's fair. You're not being biased in any way. All right. So that is believed to be uh, possible, or let me say, to be likely in reducing the participant variables. However, it is still not perfect, because it is possible for random allocation to still choose maybe the good participant to be in one group, and then random allocation choosing the other kind of participant to be in the other one. So another one is counterbalancing. Okay, um, vary the order of condition to prevent other effects and repeated measures design. So this talks more about the repeated measure design. When we spoke about repeated measures design, we spoke about a particular group of participants going to the two levels, going to group A and then going to group B when they are done with group A, right? So maybe 10 students in year 11, they all go to group A, and then when the 10 students are done, they also go to group B to experience um, the condition in group B. So instead of doing that, why don't we say 10, we have 10 students in year 11, right? Let 5 students group to group A, and then 5 students go to group B. So when the 5 students in group B are done, then they will now go to A. When the 5 students in group A are done, they will now go to B, right? So that is what is called counterbalancing. It helps to prevent what is called order effect. You know what order effect is about? Order effect leads us to two things, which is called, number one, practice effect and fatigue effect. What is practice effect? Practice effect is basically when the participants go to group A, and then they have learned the procedure, so they become better, such that when they get to group B, they performed better because they've experienced something similar. So it is an enhancement or improvement in the behavior of the participant just because of successive um, group or participation or condition participation, because they've been practicing the thing over and over, so they become better in their behavior, which is not their exact natural state. All right. The other type of other effect is the fatigue effect, which could happen that maybe because the participant went to group A, now coming back to group B, they are stressed and tired, and then their behavior is reduced. So we don't want any of those actually. So what we try to do is to make half of the group go to group A, half of the group to group B, then they interchange afterwards to balance things. All right. Okay. Yeah, I already said practice effect and fatigue effect. Okay. Now, the second one is the self-report in psychology. Self-reports gathers data directly from participants about their thoughts, okay, their feelings and behavior through questionnaires and interview, okay, either through questionnaire or through interview. Number one, it's efficient because it's quick and it's cost effective, right? For large scale data collection, especially the questionnaire, right? Okay. However, it provides subjective data. It captures personal experience and internal state. So the participants are able to record their detailed information, right? Okay, that is very good. All right. They're able to talk about everything about themselves. You know, when you observe people, you might only be able to observe what they do, but you might not know what's going on through their mind. But self-report gives you access into the in-depth information and data going through the mind of people. Now, what is the limitation? Subject to personal bias and validity concern. Okay, so people can be biased, all right? They can lie, they can say a lot of things that are not true about themselves. Okay, so the validity actually, how valid your data is, how truthful your data is at the mercy of the participant. Okay, so only the participant can determine if the data they gave you is true or not, right? Okay, moving forward, questionnaire in psychology research. The questionnaire is a structured self-report tool that allows researchers to collect data from multiple participants efficiently. It consists of a series of questions that can be administered on paper, online, or through other digital formats. Number one, we have closed-ended questions. These are questions that provide what is known as quantitative data. Okay, they are questions like a yes or no question. All right, they provide just few answers. Okay, a yes or no answers, or you have to pick between option 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that, or 5. So when you have to pick those kind of numbers, or you just have to respond with a number, all right, something like that. So those are numerical data or statistical data. So they are also referred to as quantitative data, all right. Okay, now open-ended questions on the other hand, they allow free responses. You can be able to discuss, describe, explain. It gives ability to provide insight information that are difficult to analyze. Okay. um, okay, what is the good thing about okay, I think we're going to evaluate quantitative and qualitative data later in the slide. All right, advantages of questionnaires. It is cost effective, right? It's cheap, it's convenient. Participants can complete questionnaires at their convenience, right? Standardized format. You have a format for each and every of those questionnaires. Now, anonymity can encourage honest response because you are not talking directly with the participant. So the experimenter might not also be there when you're filling it, so you are supposed to at least be truthful. So it's good, it allows that. Now, disadvantages of questionnaire: incomplete responses. Of, that is a common issue with it. Inter-rater reliability issue. Okay, if it is an open-ended question that you have to interpret, now the ability to interpret it now might be difficult. Okay, let me say interpretation might be different across people. Okay, misunderstanding can also be an issue when you fail to understand what the person wrote. Social desirability bias. Okay, this is also when the participants now try to give information just in order to please people. For example, you're given a questionnaire where you have to fill your score in mathematics. If you had, for example, 50, you can easily lie and say maybe 80 so that you don't appear as being not strong enough in that subject, for example. So that's social desirability. Okay, so moving to interview now. Interviews are direct conversation between researchers and the participant. It's conducted in person. It's a one-on-one conversation. Excuse me. All right. So and then it provides in-depth information about the participant. Okay, it encourages real-time interaction and data response. So structured interview. All right, this actually is when you encode the behavior. Okay, structured interview is when you encode the behavior. Questions. This is when you encode the questions. Not even encode, rather, you structure the question you want to ask the participant. Okay, So you have a listed question to ask the participant. What about unstructured? It's more like a conversation when you don't have a list of questions. All right, you just allow the conversation flow as need be, or maybe from the responses of the participants. Then you can ask for the question. You can create your questions around that. So that's basically unstructured interviews, where you don't have a list of questions to guide your interview. Now, semi-structured is when you have a list of questions, but you're still open to ask more questions depending on the responses of the participants. Okay, so moving on, advantages of interviews, right? There is engagement, encourages detailed response through direct interaction. Okay, there's also clarification. You can be sure that, okay, you really understand. If you don't understand, you can ask for the question. All right, so nonverbal cues can also be interpreted as against a questionnaire where all those things are lacking. Okay, another thing is flexibility allows exploration of emerging discussion points. You can explore many other things. Okay, so what about disadvantage of interview? It's time consuming, right? It can take a lot of time. If you have to do that for about 50 people, you can imagine. Okay, so complex data analysis as well. All right, it can be difficult to analyze data. All right, interviewer bias. You can get so close with your interviewee to a certain point that you begin to uh, exercise bias. Okay, social pressure. Now, face-to-face interaction also can lead to social desirability. The answer, because the person is right in front of you, and then you're being asked, what is your grade? You might lie about it. You might not be truthful. So that's another issue with it, just like a questionnaire. Now, research process in psychology, we are forming a hypothesis, defining variables. Okay, if you're designing a study, for example, okay, although this is not really important, you don't need an hypothesis for designing question. I'll still cover a video on that. So defining variables, you must be able to do that in your study. Selecting participants, you should be able to talk on that, except you were told not to do that. All right, collecting data, measures of collecting data, which includes the research methods, either through a questionnaire, through observation, through using maybe some machines or whatever. Okay, analyzing data, you're going to analyze the data. Is it through a bar chart and the likes, or histogram or pie chart? Okay, drawing conclusion. Okay, interpretation. All right, this is not basically so important though, but these are some of the steps that you might need in the designing a study question in paper 2. Okay, so now type of hypothesis. We have non-directional hypothesis. What does that mean? It states that a relationship exists between variables without specifying how they affect each other. Let's say, for example, um, um, coffee rather, okay, will affect student memory. Okay, coffee will affect student memory. Did I tell you if it will increase the memory? No. Did I tell you if it will reduce the memory? No. I only say that. Sorry, I only said. Just let me take water. Okay, yeah. I only said that coffee will affect memory. I never said how it will affect it. So that is non-directional hypothesis. What about directional hypothesis? It explains how one variable affect the other. So coffee will improve memory. That is directional. It shows the angle, the direction at which it's going to help by increasing it. Okay? Or if I also say coffee will reduce memory, it shows the direction. I'm not just saying it will affect. If I say something like there will be an effect of coffee on memory, that means I'm not saying the direction. So that is non-directional. What about null hypothesis? This states that there is no relationship between the variable. So for example, coffee will not affect memory. That is null hypothesis. Or there will be no effect of coffee on memory. So it means no, right? There will be no relationship. So, or any other thing depending on the way it is framed. So that would be null hypothesis. Okay, so variables in psychology research, we have something called operationalization. This is how you are able to define your variable. For example, we are talking about memory. What do you mean by memory? Okay, what do you mean by coffee? For example, coffee might mean that, okay, a sachet of maybe 30-gram coffee powder. Aha. So that is what you mean by coffee. If you just say coffee, coffee is too broad and it can be too vague. But you need to make us understand what do you mean by coffee. So you have to operationalize it by saying coffee in this study means 30 grams of coffee powder. Then, or if it's a particular coffee powder, you also state that. All right, that means you have operationalize your definition of coffee. What about memory? What do you mean by coffee affecting memory? Maybe the result of a test now, okay, will be what you mean by memory or ability to recall an information um, after maybe 20 minutes of interacting with it. Okay, you have to explain what you mean by memory. All right, so that is the operationalization. And I advise my students to always use something quantifiable. Okay, something that has to do with quantity. Maybe if you talk about maybe the score of the participants after a memory test, for example, so that it is easy to interpret. You can easily draw a conclusion based on how to rate that. Okay, whoever scores higher means has higher memory, whoever scores low has lower memory. Okay, now another thing is what we call pilot study. This is basically a preliminary study done before the main research to analyze the technical and financial risk, or maybe the method you're going to adopt in the study, to see if they are really effective, if they are going to be feasible, and some other things. Okay, so that is pilot study. All right, now what about sampling method in psychology? Okay, we have opportunity sampling. Okay, so what is opportunity sampling? This basically means selecting participants that are readily available at a particular place and time. Okay, you just go to a particular school, the student you find in the class, you want to use them for an experiment. That's opportunity. What about volunteer sampling? These are people that actually volunteer to come and participate. So that means you should advertise. You should have an advertisement before people volunteer, or you should have maybe a call and information around that. Okay, and then those that actually volunteer to come and participate will be volunteer sampling. All right, we also have random sampling. Right, random sampling is where you actually select people randomly out of maybe a large population. You just select people randomly using a particular method, but ensure that everybody has equal opportunity to be selected. Maybe you just go to a particular class, you have 20 papers folded in a box. Okay, so in the 20 papers, you have maybe 5 of them that has a gold color. So every participant in the class, or let me say everybody in the class, comes to pick. Now only those that select the paper with the gold color now becomes who you choose. Okay, so that's random sampling. All right, now data type and psychology in psychology research. So quantitative data and qualitative data, I mentioned that earlier. Data in numerical format, they are objective and they are highly reliable. So there is no, it's not possible to lie around this, right? For example, if you do a multiple choice question in the test, if you score 50 today, if I mark it tomorrow, it will still be 50. If I mark it another time, it will still be 50, right? So 50 is 50. You can be biased around it. What you got is what you got. Okay. So, but then if it is a qualitative data on the other hand, then, for example, looking at maybe English language essay, if you mark it today, you might rate the person maybe 70%. If you mark it another time, the person might maybe get 72, right? Because you have to interpret a lot of detail. Okay, so and the interpretation, although there might be a guided system in the process of doing that, but however, there is still a level of subjectivity that might be involved, right? Okay, so it often reflects opinion, so there is possibility of subjectivity. So, okay, this one is highly reliable and it can be statistically analyzed. However, it lacks um, what's it called now? It lacks in-depth information because they are just numerical data. Okay, this one on the other hand is non-numerical. It is in-depth description explanation. It provides rich in-depth insight However, it can be subjective when you want to interpret it. Okay, so data analysis method, we have measures of central tendency, we have the mode, the median, the mean. So I believe a lot of you are familiar with this, especially from your mathematics lessons. Okay, all right, so I don't really want to talk about this as such because I don't want it to take our time. But mean, actually, I'll just mention that mean actually is regarded as the best because it encompasses all the data in the data set. All right, whereas mean just picks the ones that is in the middle. All right, mode just picks the one that occurs the most. So mean is the only one that actually cuts across all the data sets. It includes them in the calculation. So measure of spread, this talks about range and standard deviation. Okay, range is, for example, the highest and the lowest. So what is the range of the score in mathematics? The lowest is 60, the highest is 90. So the range will be 60 to 90, right? Standard deviation, on the other hand, is to measure how different the scores are from the mean. Okay, that is a little complex. All right, you can there is a formula for that, and you can also study further on that later. So okay, so statistical test, t-tests, for example, for comparing mean score to two groups. Okay, maybe the mean of experimental group and the mean score of the control group. All right, so after getting the score of each participant, you now calculate the mean of each group to compare. Okay, moving forward, what about ethical consideration for human participants? Okay, okay, yeah, informed consent. Okay, participant must understand study aims and procedure before participating. This is very important. So participant must be able to understand the aims of the study. All right, and after the understanding the aim of the study, there they can provide informed consent, right? Okay, so informed consent basically is giving their acceptance to participate. Okay, also for human participant, there should be right to withdraw. Okay, if they feel the need to want to leave at any point in time, there should be that right given to them to want to withdraw. Okay, another one is privacy. Okay, a lot of students actually confuse privacy and confidentiality. Privacy is rather uh, the right of the participants to keep certain information to themselves. Okay, I don't want to tell you my age. For example, if you ask me a question around that, maybe I can just tell you that, okay, yeah, I prefer to keep it as a secret. It's my private matter. Okay, so there should be that right, there should be that possibility. Okay, it's not as if, oh, you have to tell me, oh, you just have to tell me. No, there should be privacy. Confidentiality, on the other hand, is after I've given you all my information, okay, because of the study. So if I don't want you to publish it to the public, you don't have to. All right, I give you my information so that you just get to know much information about the study using me as a participant. So, but then I want you to keep the information. All right, don't disclose it to the public. Okay, so there should be confidentiality. You must keep my information safe. Another way experimental go around this is, despite the fact that they've gotten the information, if they want to publish it, then they won't reveal the name of the participant. All right, they won't reveal the name. They can just use initial. All right, the experimenter know who is this, but then they might just use, instead of saying Jane, for example, they can just use maybe Nick. So in their mind, they already knows that, okay, Jane is Nick, but the entire public now will not know who is Nick. Okay, so there should be protection from all form of harm, psychological stress, physical harm. Okay, all form of um, harm, there should be protection. So if your experimenter is going to expose participants, so it can be evaluated as not being good enough. Okay, all right, so ethical consideration for animal research. All right, please take note. Replacement, use alternative research method where possible. Okay, if possible, don't use the animal at all. That is one of the ethical consideration. But if it is not possible, then you can use animal. So, but if possible, don't use animal. So which means that if possible, if you can just look at any other study that has been done that is similar, so then adopt it. Or maybe if you can use animation, if possible, to adopt it. But if there are no options, then it's possible you can use an animal. So try as much as possible not to use an animal if possible, depending on the situation. So that is one. Numbers of animals. So try to use minimal numbers as much as possible. Although for humans, okay, although it's not part of the ethical consideration, but we want to use as much humans as possible so that we can generalize the study. But for animals, use the smallest number possible. All right. If two people will give you the results you want to get in your study, so use two. Even if one, they use one. You don't have to use 100 or 2,000 animals. That can be very, very stressful for them. So species and strains. So select the species that are less susceptible to pain. So that means that the species of animals that are strong enough that can be able to cope easily with your study. So use those species, not the species that will, for example, get pain or maybe be stressed during your research. We have different species. We have some that are very, very strong, whereas we have some that are very, very fragile. So use those that are strong. Right now, pain and distress. Avoid procedures that cause physical or psychological harm to the animals. Okay? Yeah, so evaluating research method in psychology, we look at reliability when we are evaluating a study. All right? So, talking about reliability, this talks about the consistency and replicability of the result. Okay, how consistent is the result over time? When you do it over and over again, is it going to be consistent? And reliability can be gotten from ability to replicate the study. You can determine reliability when there is ability to replicate. So if you can repeat it over and over again, then the reliability is probably going to be high. Okay, so replicability is also gotten from standardization, which means you should standardize your procedure. You should have a particular definition of every part. This thing is 10. This one will be 20. This one is going to be like this. This one should be arranged this way. This room is going to be 10 meter by, you should have standardization for every of the procedure. Then that will help to be able to replicate the study over and over again. And that will also help in the reliability aspect. So another one is validity, the degree to which the study measures what it intends to measure. All right. So if you're trying to measure memory, then are you actually doing something that measures memory? Okay. Are you using a test that measures memory, or what you're doing does not really measure memory? So that is validity. Ecological validity, how well the finding applies to real world. Okay. Can the study be applied to real environment, or is just in an artificial environment alone? Generalizability is to what extent this study can represent the behavior of the entire people out there. Okay, that means if you use large human sample, then it increases the generalizability, right? Okay, so additional evaluation concept, test retest reliability. This is a measure of consistency over time. When you test and you test again, so if the study is consistent, then it's test retest reliability. Another one is inter-rater reliability. This is when you have two people that are observing the behavior. Let's say, for example, they are recording the behavior and both of them agree that this thing is consistent, is the same thing. What I've recorded is the same thing you also recorded. That means there is inter-rater reliability. Another concept is demand characteristics. When participants alter their behavior because they perceived something around the study, all right? Because they perceived that maybe there could be this or that in this study, or maybe there could be a particular test at the end, then they change their behavior to be maybe more attentive in class because they perceive that there might be a test. So that's the man characteristics. Okay, now into our observer reliability. All right, the extent to which different observer records similar finding. Okay, okay, so the inter-rater reliability is rather interpreting the study the same way. Okay, what I have interpreted from what you did is the same thing that this other person interpreted. Now, inter-observer reliability on the other hand is when what I have recorded now is just, this is about the record, this is about the rating. Okay, we recorded the same thing. Okay, so that is that, and I think that is the end of the slide. So I try to make this thing as short as possible. However, when you go through your course book, you can still find detail on I think I didn't mention case study. All right, case study is actually an in-depth study into a single individual, or let me just say an individual or a single person or a group of people in some situation. It can just be a family. All right, so that is a study into that. I don't think there is anything more serious about case study that you have to know except that, and then you can also know that it provides in-depth analysis or in-depth investigation into the subject, right? Okay, so when you are actually engaged in case study, you can use interview, which is under self-report. You can also use a questionnaire, which is still under self-report. You can also carry out an experiment even in case study. Okay, so there's nothing much under that. Okay, I think another thing is correlation that I didn't also mention. Correlation rather shows the relationship between variables. Okay, it doesn't show a causal effect like a experiment, but rather it shows relationship between variables. Okay, so that shows that maybe an increase in this variable just lead to an increase in that variable. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is caused. Maybe each time you see this person, there is a possibility that this person will come. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's this person that brought this other person. It's just a possibility. So that's correlation. So we have positive correlation, we have negative correlation as well. Positive correlation talks about when there is an increase in one variable and there is an increase in the other variable, or there is a reduction in one variable and there is a reduction in the other variable. Okay, now negative correlation on the other hand says when there is an increase in one variable, there is a decrease in the other, or decrease in the one variable, increase in the other. So they go opposite ways. All right, so I think that's the most important thing about correlation. All right, and most of the time correlations are analyzed using a scatter graph. Scatter graph, you can check your course book for further details on that. So um, experiments are mostly analyzed using bar charts, histogram and the likes. Okay, so what else didn't I mention? Observation. Okay, observation is another thing that I didn't mention. Okay, it's also part of the research method. It's basically observing the participants' behavior. Okay, and we have different kinds of observation. We have participant observation, which is when the researcher participates with the participants in whatever it is they are doing, right? Okay, non-participant observation is when the participants are doing whatever they're doing alone, and then the researcher is observing um, from a distance. For example, he's not doing it with them. For example, participant observation could be playing football together with the participants. All right, you're doing it together, but non-participants, you're watching them from outside. Okay, so there is also overt observation and covert observation. Overt observation talks about when the participants know that you're observing them. Covert observation talks about when the participants are not aware. So one of the ways of doing that is to use a camera. Okay, you can place camera strategically so the participant cannot see you, that you're looking at them. Okay, another way is to use one-way mirror. That is, you can see those that are inside from if you are outside, but those that are inside cannot see you. All right, so those are the two ways you can use that. All right, so another one is the structured observation. This is where you have encoded behavior. You have specific behavior that you're looking out for. All right, so you're not just looking at any behavior that is being displayed by the participant. Okay, so another one is the unstructured observation. That is where you're just going to record any behavior that is being displayed by the participant. So they are basically opposite. Okay, for example, I want to study maybe student habit at home. So if I decide to look at maybe engagement with TV and engagement with phone, so those are the basic things that I'm looking out for. looking out for. I'm going to record around that, how long they spend with TV, how long they spend on phone. Okay, then I have encoded the behavior I'm looking out for. So that is structured observation. But if I'm just going to record everything they do at home, that's unstructured observation. So we also have controlled observation. This is a kind of observation that is done in an artificial environment. Let me put it that way, like in a laboratory or in a controlled environment. So which means it is not in the natural environment. You control the environment where you observe the people. You bring them into a particular room and you control everything and you observe them there. All right. And then is there okay, there's also uncontrolled observation where you observe people basically in their natural setting, in their natural environment. So I think that is that as regards the observation. So I think I've been able to cover practically the most important part of the research method. So thank you very much for the attention. I hope this video is not too long. Okay, so please, if you enjoyed the video, if you have learned one or two things from it, please like the video and also please help me to subscribe to the channel. So thank you very much. I wish you all the best in your preparation. Okay, goodbye.